Alright, so we've got a 2003 TTR125 that is leaking fuel excessively. Customer was unsure on how long the carburetor was sat, so we bought a cheap Chinese one off of Amazon. Immediately I hooked it up and it was leaking fuel. So I've got the bowl off, which was 4 screws at the bottom. You just pull the cap off. And basically what we're going to be looking for is this float needle here. And I believe that this is what's causing our fuel leak and it's not sealing correctly. A lot of times what you can do is check the fuel float, and sometimes if it's sitting in too low like this, then it'll allow too much fuel in and not shut the valve off. If it's too high like this, then it won't be enough fuel and you'll end up burning the fuel out in the carburetor faster than it can fill up. So right now the float level is a little bit low. Usually level is most specifications, but what we're going to do here is we're just going to hook up our fuel line and we're going to turn the fuel on the other side here and just see what it does. And right now you can see it's leaking fuel already. I'm going to go ahead and shut it manually. And you can see I've got it pushed all the way down and it's still right there. It finally turned off. So since I'm able to force it inward, it doesn't appear that it's the float needle. It seems to me that it's actually the little tab on the float itself. And what we'll do is we'll adjust that a little bit, see if we can get the fuel to actually shut off on its own. And hopefully that will fix it. I'll go to my box and grab a little pick. Okay. So what we're going to do is right here, there's a little pin. Just push that inward. And it'll pop out the other side like this. Pull the pin out, put it in a little bucket. And we're going to take the float bowl off. And we're going to see if there's any debris in there. So, there's a little bubble. Yeah, right here, look. A little piece of debris. I don't know if you can see that right there. Maybe the camera will focus on it. Maybe not. You can't really see it. There's a little bit of debris in there, and that'll cause the float needle to either stick open at times, or it will also cause leaking fuel like what we have. So this is the new needle, and of course this is brand new, straight from Amazon. And Chinese parts are kind of junk anyway, but this carburetor didn't have an OEM one to begin with, so we're going to start with our fuel. Turn it on reserve. I don't know how low it is. There we go. Check our fuel flow. Looks good. As of right now, it's not leaking. So, what we'll do at this point is try to set our float valve height and see if we can get that to actually shut off. So shut the fuel off again, so we can unplug the line, check our fuel into our bucket. Take our pin, our float bowl. this as an assembly. So you stick the float needle back in there, float on top. What I'm doing is I'm fighting this little clip right here because that's what holds the float needle on. And grab our little pin. Majority of the time it doesn't matter which way it goes in, but you're going to slide that in your hole. There we go. Good to go there. So typically the technique is to set the float height to where it's barely touching. And right there is where it's got a lot of play. So what I'm going to do is, if you bend the tab downward, it'll adjust the float height up. This, a little bit adjusted to where the float bowl is shutting the valve. So let's get our fuel. Remember, our main goal here is to keep it from overflowing with fuel. So as of right now, our fuel is flowing, but it's shut off, and if we tip it upside down like this, fuel goes, and fuel is now stopped. So that appears to have fixed our issue, is just by bending that tab just a little bit to where it won't overflow with fuel. And you can see that what I've done is this float line right here and this gasket surface, technically it's supposed to be this one inward like this. I just go like this, it's fine. It's nice and level. And even then, if you wanted to be a little courteous, most specifications are plus or minus 1 millimeter. So you could even bend this down even a hair more. And it's hard to do this with one hand. See if I can get it here. Flows, and it stops, flows, stops, flows, stops. So that should be about where it's at. I think what I'll end up doing is just bending this tab a little bit more down. Shut this fuel flow off so it doesn't smell like gas. What I'm doing, this tab, man, you can't really see it, huh? This tab here is what I'm bending downward, and what that's doing is it's moving the floats upward, so that'll be towards the bowl. And this one's a little bit more difficult to deal with, so I think what we'll do at this point is I'll actually take the float off and I'll bend this tab and push it downward just a hair, because it's a lot easier to adjust it upward than it is downward. So that's going to be pretty good there, I think. Get our float needle again. Put it on the tab. Fuel supply port, carburetor. Gonna have to wiggle it till it sits down. There we go. Then take our pin again. And we'll put it in there. So if you look at this point, you can see the horizon line here, and this is actually pointed a little bit upward. So we overbent it just a hair, so that way we can try to bend it back down. So we're going to adjust it upwards just a hair. Well, now it's too low again. Not a fan of these plastic ones. They can tend to be a little bit more touchy. Here we go. That's probably okay. That's probably good there. These 125s don't burn a whole lot of fuel. So, yeah, the horizon line here on the case. The horizon line there is up just a little bit. And at this point, we'll put it back together. And we'll see if it has fixed our issue. Footbolt goes on top. 4 screws. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'd recommend a screwdriver until you get used to it, but all I do is snug them down. Don't want these too tight. I just run them in there because I'm lazy. I always hand tighten them with a screwdriver at the end. There we go. Okay. So now what we'll do is our carburetor goes this way. This is just the choke here. Yeah, it really needs to be fixed at some point. Hook up our fuel line. You can't really see it. I'm hooking up the fuel line here, like so. And what we're going to do is this line is a little bit longer, so we're going to hook this up back into the intake boot. And there is, be able to see it, a little tab on the carburetor right there, and then there's a little opening right here on the intake boot, so that way you know where it sits in there. We'll tighten her up. It's tightening the clamp. You don't have to run these in too tight. You can see where it kind of starts getting tight there. Everything looks good. Choke there. Doesn't like the aftermarket one very much. So let's turn our fuel on. And let it fill up and see if it starts leaking. So far so good. It's not pouring fuel out like before. So the drain is right here. The drain tube is here. This is a crank breather, and this hose right here is super dry right now. So if there's any fuel coming out, I'd be able to see it right there. So it seems to be all right. I guess let's go ahead and fire it up and see what happens.